We have told our Nigerians that carrying a single person in the vehicle but in the boot is overloading, because there is no space for you to carry him in the trunk of the vehicle, but you have carried him in the boot like a cow or like a goat. So it's overloading itself.
What do you do when such persons are caught? So that's what do you do?
Because I told you it's an overloading. It's tantamount to the same type of fines. The fines for overloading is 10,000. By carrying just a person in that boot, you also pay 10,000.
What about on the seats? A seat that's supposed to take 3 people and 1 person takes 3 people and 5 people. What do you do? It's
that is excessive overloading within the trunk of the vehicle. Everybody knows a taxi is supposed to carry 5 persons, including the driver. So when you put 2 people at the front, including driver 3, that is excessive. It's too much.
And some sitting on the gearbox.
Yes, or sitting even on the laps. You see men lapping themselves, women lapping themselves, and children lapping themselves. All this one are intricacies of overloading. And when it happens, we make arrest by taking the vehicle from the owner to our office, or right away drop the person, the overloaded person there, so that we give him the ticket and go and pay the prescribed fines.
Okay. All right. Now let's return to Frank Mba once more. Now to specifics. Talking about the highways now. If you fly between Abuja, Lokoja down to the eastern part of the country, you discover that you meet certain checkpoints. You know, some soldiers, some policemen. In some areas, not even up to half a kilometer, you see 2 or 3 postings, where your men are on the road. And last week, or thereabouts, we had that the IG said, look, that all illegal, checkpoints, should be dismantled. And what have you. And please, I want you to explain, to us as to what the arrangement is like, this period. Is there any collaboration between the police and other agencies whom we find on the highways? And of course, if you track a story we had early last week at the Onitsha Head Bridge, where police checkpoint has caused a lot of delays and making the bridge to carry overload of vehicles, who could not enter Onitsha because of the checkpoint. So, what is the correlation between such and, of course, the strategies that you have for the protection of human life and property during this period?
Your questions are so many. You lumped so many things at the same time. I will try to deal with them as much as I can. But if you permit me, I would like to speak a bit about some of the things that Kabil talked about, particularly the issue of our lifestyle that exposes some of our lifestyle that exposes us to being victimized easily by criminals. He spoke excellently about some of the things we post on the social media, and these become source of intelligence for the men of the underworld. They simply mine them, harvest them, and deploy them against us. But it's not just that. The way we use our telephones in this country, the phone, a very simple gadget, is a tool for all manners of transaction, legitimate transaction, commercial transactions, communication tool. Is also a tool in our hands as law enforcement agents for detecting crime. But incidentally, is also a tool in the hands of the men of the underworld for committing crimes. Sometimes you find people at the motor parks, in the offices, at the airport, at the train stations, and they make calls at very loud voices, at high-pitched tones, and they discuss sensitive financial dealings. This is very dangerous. You don't know the people. You are making yourself vulnerable. We've beyond that, we've also seen situations where people are about to travel, like he said, and then they tell everybody. The truth really is, all your information, there is what we call the need to know basis. You share information on the need to know basis. I've investigated cases in the past where burglars, because they know clearly that a particular family have traveled, they made their way into the house, tied the security man down, and make sure after tying the guy, they put him right in their presence because they didn't want to tie him and leave him outside. It was a very big compound, and they went into the house. They spent 12 hours in the house. They took their time to ransack the house because they know when the family traveled, they know when the family will be coming back. They know they've gone for Christmas holidays. Exactly, it was a Christmas holiday. They opened the fridge. They had enough time, practically partying in the house. Had enough drinks, sorted out all the things they needed to sort, made food for themselves, ate, had slept.
The audacity.
Yes, and had very good time. They spent over 12 hours. It's a high-walled compound, so nobody outside knew what was happening. If you're driving past, the house was looking very peaceful and you will not in any way spot any abnormality. We've also seen people, sometimes when they make mega business deals, they go to church to give testimony. Well, I am not coming in the way of pastors. I'm not coming in the way of your tithes. I'm not coming in the way of anything. But I'm a cop, and it's my duty to keep the citizens safe. You can give your testimony without giving out the details. I've seen people who go to church and say, oh, testimony time. Brothers and sisters, I just want you to help me thank the Lord. I did this contract for the Nigerian police force and they've been owing me 35 million for the past 4 years. Pastor just prayed for me and I visited IGP Mohammed Abubakar Damo and I presented my papers and he wrote approved. And in 5 days' time, I was paid. Today, I'm 35 million richer. And everybody clap.
Yes.
And right inside the church,
The criminals
there are criminals. You've just made yourself a veritable target for kidnapping. Because you've just told people, boy, if you take this guy, you are sure of at least 10 M.
Of course.
Or the whole 35 will go.
And let's not be, they will tell themselves, let's not be greedy.
Yeah.
10 M is a good deal, so let's go for him. And so, as our lifestyle is key, the way we communicate, the way we live our life, the way we behave when we go out on parties, on dates, in clubhouses, these are very key things that we need to watch. And if we do these things properly, we reduce our vulnerability. If we do them wrongly, we clearly expose our vulnerability. Back to your specifics. The presence of policemen on our highways we specifically deploy them on the highway for specific reasons. They are there to prevent crimes. Traditionally, the mere presence of policemen walking on their beat act as a strong deterrent to criminals. So their presence on the highway, one, is to prevent crimes, two, to detect crimes. On that highway, at so many occasions, stolen vehicles have been intercepted, robbers have been arrested, fleeing kidnappers arrested, arms and ammunition recovered. So they also do a bit of detection. They're also there to provide support for other law enforcement agents. Our brothers in the Federal Road Safety, for example, up till today are not armed, and so we know that, and that's why you see that when they locate their point, it is a working arrangement. We locate our point close to them so that we can also provide them with some kind of covering fire. So if you want to take an advantage of a road safety, a marshal or a corps personnel because you think he's not armed, you may think twice, because 50 meters away from him or 100 meters away from him or 20 meters away from him are armed policemen. So we are also there to provide and synergize, provide support and synergize with our counterparts from other agencies. We are also there to respond to distress calls. We are there to respond to inquiries from citizens. And we are there to actually make the journey of our citizens safer and smoother. When a police officer goes out of any of these core duties and responsibilities, he or she is beginning to look for trouble, because it is totally antithetical to his calling for him to become a problem to the citizens while on the highway. He is supposed to be a problem solver, a facilitator, and a helper while on the road. And we are also telling citizens, when you have unsavory experience while traveling, please do try as much as possible to communicate to us. The IG is very particular about the conduct of policemen on the highway. We have received complaints, particularly on Shagamu or Bini Asaba Expressway. And I know that the IGP gave clear-cut instructions that all nipping points that are not operationally expedient for crime prevention and detection should be dismantled. Not only that, the commissioners of police nationwide, particularly in those corridors where we know there will be a lot of traffic during this period, I've also been given marching orders to ensure round-the-clock, personalized, tailored to suit supervision of the men on the road. And we are following up on that. We've also dispatched monitoring teams from the force headquarters to also move to the highways and then begin to police the policemen while the policemen are policing the citizens.
So can we have an estimate of how many of your personnel are out there this period?
I don't love talking figures. I know the media love figures. Yes, I don't like talking figures. But generally, during this period, we make use of the full complements of our human and our operational assets. Usually, police officers, our leave schedules are expected to run from January till around November. And anytime from November, December, we discourage police officers going on leave, except when such requests are expedient, particularly health grounds and some very special grounds. So we have sufficient manpower to man our highways. We have sufficient manpower to man those areas that we consider very, very crucial at this period. We are not just deploying men. We are not just deploying vehicle. The A-Wing will also be on ground to provide area surveillance, particularly on these roads, on those highways that we've designated as very special highways. And you know, recently the president was at the force headquarters where he commissioned some of our tactical vehicles, and some of those vehicles are fitted with surveillance capacities. we are also deploying this equipment, not just for the Yuletide, but also to police our highways beyond the Yuletide.
Okay. We thank you, Frank Mba, for the analysis. I think one of the most important aspects of his submission this morning actually has to do with our behavior. Nigerians. We show off a lot. We want to show you that we have landed. We have arrived. It's hard time. But all the same, they have their own disadvantages, which has been highlighted by Frank Mba and of course Kaibiru. Kaibiru, you have listened to Frank Mba, and you also know the nature of security architecture of the country, especially during festive period like this. What is your general assessment on what has been explained as the plans that the police have, as well as the FRSC and the other agencies?
I think it's quite encouraging. They seem to be aware. Of course, they are aware of the circumstances in the country, and they are out there giving assurances. And even the physical presence of the fourth PRO here is an indication of that. And of course, road safety. So that's quite commendable. But having said that, I think a lot of Nigerians would want to hear of the aspect of rapid response, for instance, that he emphasized on, which is a critical component of security and policing functions. I know that there are numbers, especially the road safety. They must be commended for that. I have been a personal victim, as it were, and have benefited from that service, where a family member of mine had an accident. We called, and like he rightly said, in less than 15 minutes they responded as first responders. So that's really encouraging. But I think beyond that, that number needs to be publicized, and I hope the first PRO would make available that number to Nigerians, and then a massive rollout of that number so that Nigerians are aware of that number. And when we are in distress, we're able to call that number, and response time, the international standard is 7 minutes, less than 7 minutes actually, for policing issues. Other issues that would affect the road safety, you have that leverage between 7 to 15 minutes. So I think that is really critical. The second component, which he also mentioned, but I hope he can expand on that, is he's mentioned the policing duties, especially as the highway is concerned. But what kind of monitoring and evaluation measures will the police put in place so that those antithetical behavior that he has mentioned are avoided? 2 days ago, actually, I was driving, I went to Kubwa on my way back into the city. I saw what I would call a checkpoint. And this was around the Banex Plaza, driving from Next towards Banex Plaza. I spent about almost 30 minutes.
The hold up there is terrible at that time.
Honestly. And when I approached, I called the guy on duty and asked him, who is your supervisor? He pointed to a guy. And I told him, I said, you want to build better relationships with the public. This is not the way to go about. Yes, you are here carrying out the function, but must you narrow that corridor to the extent that you build a 30 minutes delay? The public who experiences that is not going to be happy with you. That your desire to build a better relationship between you and the public, you have to ask yourself, if you are put in that situation, will you be happy? So I think there is need for improvement there. There are better ways of carrying out that particular responsibility without causing that kind of hardship for a Nigerian. I mean, that day I went to see a family member and I was coming back home. I was tired. I wanted to be home early, and then I experienced that. So I think, I hope the police will look into that and improve on. But overall, like I said at the beginning, I think the preparations, the messaging is quite encouraging, and we need to also give kudos to them for that.
Okay, do you think that the high rate of unemployment in the country is a contributory factor to the spike in crime and criminality in Nigeria, especially this period?
Certainly, and we don't need to go far to to look for answers to your question. The recently launched National Security Strategy document hammered on that. in an attempt to create a nexus between, as it were, human security and physical security. The National Security Advisor spoke at length around that, how poverty, inequality, unemployment, illiteracy, name them, all the human factors have contributed to national security. So yes, there is a nexus between things like unemployment and national security, and to that extent I think we need to commend the present government for all the measures it's putting in place to enhance, especially SMEs, their ability to absorb the unemployed. Also social welfare measures that have been put in place by the government to take care of that particular group of society that are either underemployed or unemployed. But beyond that, I think more needs to be done. If there are 40 million Nigerian youths, quote and unquote, that are unemployed, then that's a veritable pool of assets for recruitment by either criminals, terrorists, bandits, name them. The kind of disenchantment and I would say perception and sometimes real marginalization between several segments of the society is a huge challenge that I think is affecting national security. And I'm really, really happy that the National Security Strategy has mentioned that. And hopefully as we go into 2020 and we see the implementation of that particular National Security Strategy, some of these human security elements will be taken care of. And then hopefully in the long run we'll see a reduction on some of these challenges.
Yes, and the irony of it all, is that the poverty, quality, unemployment, and all that. Of course, you're right to have said that it's all part of is a contributory factor, to the crimes and criminality in the country. But one irony is the fact that in some cases, if you like, in most cases, some of the criminals that have been caught are not unemployed. Some of them are businessmen, who are even doing well. Right, and started to engage, in criminality. Yes, of course, some unemployed are involved, but even the organizers, because an unemployed person cannot afford the AK-47, for instance, so who empowers him with AK-47? That's somebody.
But the unemployed person might not be able to afford AK-47, but he's easily recruited by the person who can afford it.
All right.
That's it. I'm sorry, I jumped.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The truth really is, yes, there is a strong nexus between unemployment and crime. However, like you also rightly noted, greed is also a major driving factor. I deal with real-time situations. I deal with real-time criminals. I'm not talking theory. And so sometimes you find that it's like a seamless trend. At the beginning, the young man is recruited because he's unemployed. He was vulnerable. Someone took advantage of him, recruited him. At the beginning, he's getting just peanuts, and gradually he begins to climb the ladder in the organized criminal structure, and then suddenly he starts making mega money. And then initially, when he joined, he had a desire of just making little money and pulling out. Then he gets hooked, and then he wants to make bigger money. At that point in time, he has moved away from just the challenge of unemployment, and then he's now hooked by greed. He has made such money. He's making bigger money. Some of them even sets up a business. We have one big-time kidnapper that we arrested in Lagos some time ago. He comes into Nigeria and does mega kidnapping operations. He had a thriving business in Ghana. He was as then a very big importer in Ghana. He makes money here. Sometimes he even buy goods in Nigeria. 4-5 trailer loads of goods, and then crosses the border with the goods and go to Ghana. So he was running multiple enterprise. He makes money from kidnapping. He launders it into legitimate business. And then so it's a combination of all and a major problem again is the issue of drug. Drug abuse is also one of the factors driving violence crime in Nigeria. Recently, we intercepted a very large load of tramadol heading to the northeast. And then you begin to understand that a whole lot of our young men who are involved in violence, they can't do that when they are normal. So they needed to be on these drugs. And then there's also a very strong nexus between poverty, illiteracy, and drug abuse, because when people are poor, sometimes they take solace in drugs. Because at the moment they are high on drugs, momentarily, they feel good. They feel bigger than you, bigger than Kabir, bigger than all of you here, and they feel that they run things and things don't run them. And so it's a cyclical scenario, and for us to be able to deal with this, we must continue to knock them off, knock down the level of illiteracy, ramp out to school children, deal with poverty, deal with unemployment. Unfortunately, for those of us in core law enforcement, these are all areas that are absolutely, clearly outside our control. So we continue to do what we can do, but we need policymakers, politicians, and people in certain areas to also play their own part so that our jobs and our tasks will be easier.
Okay, thank you so much, DC Frank Uba. We'll be taking a break right now. When we return, we're talking security and safety during the Yuletide. Don't go away.
My name is Balaunti. I'm the Managing Director of Petroleum Product Marketing Company, a subsidiary of NNPC. There are significant price discrepancy between Nigeria and its neighbors across Africa. There's a discrepancy of between 150 to 250 naira. That creates an incentive for arbitrage, whereby smuggling triumphed by taking petroleum product across the neighbors so that they can be sold at higher price. While the smugglers are making the money, Nigeria is paying for it. And that payment is distorting everything that we do in terms of planning, in terms of our ability to fund, and thereby taking money that is meant for development. The introduction of this Operation White will have a reduction of close to 6 million liters on a daily basis, which if you take an average of 150, translate to a saving of over 1 billion naira every day. That is the benefit of Operation White, and we have started seeing the great benefit.
To dey disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say, I no go dey do am again, because change begins with me.
Cross the other side of the road.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me fast where they go.
Make her dey stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go dey stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
This Saturday on the
We are looking at safety and security on our roads this festive period, and of course, because we are not oblivious of the fact that there is a public apprehension about what will be happening on our roads and even our homes, which we have, of course, left to travel to the hinterland. So it's a very important topic we are handling this morning. Kabiru wanted to say something shortly before we went on break. You know, let's hear you out before we go
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what Frank Mba has mentioned to emphasize the point around law enforcement. Yes, we can, mention the causative factors of crime. He's reeled them out: drug addiction, weapon proliferation. But law enforcement is paramount. Taxpayers' money, budgeted yearly, year in, year out, for law enforcement. So I think it would be unfair, really, not to emphasize that point. So I just wanted to mention that we need to see perhaps an enhancement in those aspects, so that the deterrence element that law enforcement, brings is actually emphasized. Nigerians expect that, and I think it's only fair, since we have the presence of, some two critical law enforcement agencies here, to mention that they are doing very well, no doubt about it, but there are areas where Nigerians expect an improvement. One of the critical areas is the nexus, or the role between law enforcement and the enhancement of our criminal justice system. He mentioned a particular kidnap case. That case is still hanging. The court system is yet to rule on it, and part of the reason is because of the evidence is unfortunately that was not gathered properly, as it were, during the arrest of that particular case. I think the evidence was tempered with. So there is a need for our law enforcement agencies to look critically at their role in supporting the enhancement of our criminal justice system.
Okay, thank you so much. We have a number of tweets that came in while we were on break. I begin with Mutana Farouk. The security and safety of everything that exists is in the hands of God. Police and other security agents can only do their best within the scope of human capacity. It is on this stance I urge everyone to be security conscious at any point in time and celebrate the period decently.
All right, from Sani Michael or Marco J, we thank God that the deadly Lokoja Abuja road that was recently a den of kidnappers is now having attention of security operatives. However, as we go for Yuletide, every Nigerian should be on the watch out, not to be taken unawares by these miscreants. Security is everyone's business.
Omar Bolaham Babs tweets, the best form of security is self-security. People should be careful of where they visit, who they mingle with. Government on its side across all levels should provide safer roads for commuters. The security officers on the highway should do less of waiting you get for us, please.
All right, from Law Alpha C, security operatives should be on red alert this Yuletide period, particularly on soft spots in northern parts of the country, to avoid possible strikes from enemies of the state. Security of lives during the Yuletide depends largely on the mood of motorists. Caution should be a watchword. And
Chris Simon tweets here that this is festive period. If you're a driver, teacher, businessman, businesswoman, etc., anything that would endanger your life, avoid it. Be law-abiding and vigilant. Good morning and have a peaceful celebration. All right, from Ibrahim Modu Aji, security needs to be tightened, especially in the 3 states of Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa, going by the recent threats or attacks in Damaturu. Hope there is a strong preventive and proactive measures put in place to ensure hitch-free Yuletide period. And Mike Anyako tweets, security and safety of individuals are important. Many Nigerians in diaspora come back to celebrate the Yuletide. The security operatives must live up to their responsibilities to ensure adequate security throughout the country. They must not relax after Christmas. Titus Mondayok, he says security and safety is every day and every moment affairs, not only on special occasions like the Yuletide period, but where is the motivation for those agencies responsible? And Adejumo Paul Olubumi tweets, I call on all to avoid drunk driving, to be very vigilant, especially around their churches during Christmas service, same to Christians in their communities, vigilance and prompt reporting of suspicious movement. And lastly, I call on the police to be super active during the Yuletide. We expect prompt response to any distress call. Also, the police should engage in a show of force and make their presence felt around worship centers. All right, and those were the tweets for now. Let's get back to Omar Guntu Ibrahim. What are the challenges that are confronting you at the moment, as you go about implementing your strategy for this Yuletide period?
More importantly, You know, this period, all the children are back from schools. The parents should be very, very sensitive of what their children can do. We see in the city that children will just pick key that is left carelessly by the parent, and they take the vehicle, a smart vehicle, and enter the road. And that one is giving us a serious challenge. Then the drivers too, and the passengers, the drivers and the commuters should be driver educated, not just going to the park and board any other vehicle you see there. It's not every vehicle that is good enough to be traveled with. Yes. Do you understand? And even the drivers, not all drivers are drivers. Yes. Look at driver, study his psyche. Notice maybe if he has dry lips, you tend to think maybe that one want to make a lot of money during this period, and don't board his vehicle.
If you have dry lips?
Dry lips, very dry lips. It's perhaps he talks. Okay. Yes, when he talks, watch the tongue. If it's colored, then you leave that vehicle. And in fact, the vehicle itself, study it, go round. Don't enter the vehicle. Look at the tires, look at the body of the vehicle, and even inside, if there are enough restraint to save you when there is an accident, and so on and so forth. The drivers must feel what we call the passenger manifest. Okay. This time, we often rescue people, and we do not know their parents, their relations, and the number to call to connect us with the parent. So we want all passengers to ensure that they write their names on the manifest and the names of the relations and the phone number, which number to call. That will help us in all these intricacies of driving that we are noticing.
So if something that you just talked about occurs and you feel as a passenger, maybe I'm halfway and I feel I'm not happy with the way he's driving, and so if I tell him to stop, what number do I call to alert you in case of situations like this?
A situation like the when there is no crash, then you look up to our next point. Okay. The police are there, lots of people are there. When you get there, you report the attitude of the driver. It's okay. When you report that, we will do something. Something will be done.
Frank, what kind of synergy exists between your men on the highway and the men of other armed forces? Is there any collaboration? Because we often see the soldiers on the road as well as policemen.
There are lots of collaboration going on beyond even what Nigerians can see. Most of these men on the road, most of the teams, whether they are police teams, road safety, whether they are civil defense, or whether they are counterparts from the military, they have a very strong working relationship. And they also have the capacity to reach each other when things are happening, particularly for those on the same corridor. Beyond that, their commanders are also in touch with each other. So there is a very strong working relationship between the police, the Federal Road Safety Corps, the civil defense, the customs, and the military, because these are the bulk of the people that you find on our highways. The rest of them, like the immigrations, you find them usually at the entry and exit points into the country. Occasionally, you may also find operatives from the narcotic unit, the NDLE, also coming out to conduct snap checks, usually when they probably are acting on an intelligence. So, but in all of this, we know the location of each other, and it is important for us to know the location of each other, not just because we need to constantly exchange information, but we also need to be able to mobilize each other for backup and assistance if need be. And also, it's also important for us to know our locations in order to avoid incidences involving friendly fires.
There's something you just mentioned now, that's the intelligence, which is key to the security. Is that intelligence sharing among all these?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, even in our national command and control center that was also part of the assets that was commissioned by the president last Friday, we have a dedicated section which is a joint control room. And if you enter the joint control room, there's a designated desk for every agency, from the military to the road safety to the civil defense to the customs to the immigration, even up to NEMA. We've got dedicated desks for them. So we work together, and we don't really have a choice. We have to work together. We have just one country called ours, and we have the same parents. We are all employed by the government, and for almost achieving the same purpose. The only difference is we are employed to take care of the different components of the same assignment. It's like a man who wants to build. The mason or the bricklayer is doing one job, the engineer is doing another. From the point the architectural drawing comes out, everybody is expected to play different role. The tiler, the electrician, the plumber, the carpenter, the roofing guy. But at the end of the day, the objective is to be able to have a beautifully finished, architecturally safe building, and that's exactly what we're doing here.
Yeah, before we leave you were talking about bangers, or people call bangers, or knockouts, that we use in celebrating a Christmas.
Yes.
I used it as a child. It's a lot of fun.
Yes.
No, I remember one Christmas I was sleeping. They just in Maiduguri. It's very when you hear something like that, you're on. The knockout they just used it, and I jumped out of bed because I was sleeping, and I rushed. I was running, gathering my things, trying to run away because I thought the insurgents have come to my area. So what measures are being put in place to ensure that things like this don't happen?
Good. I'm glad that both of you have got true life experience of bangers or crackers or knockouts. The truth about it is, like Kieran said, it's fun.
It's fun.
It can be fun. And that's part of the problem where this have continued, because you used it, probably you used it as a child, probably your father used it, and so you're looking at your child and you're like, there's no harm in allowing your child to use it. But the truth really is, like St. Paul will say, must we continue in sin that grace may abound? The answer is no. We can't continue in sin because we enjoy God's grace.
Yes.
You might have used it without problem. But what are the odds? What are the assurance you've got that your precious child will use it without having a problem? Just last week in Ebonyi State, a young child lost 3 of his fingers using knockout. People often fail to realize that knockouts, even the smallest quantity, can actually create a major disaster or a major accident. And the loss of the injuries arising from knockouts occurs on your hands, your faces, and often your eyes. And these are very sensitive parts of the body. But because these injuries are not so common, people forget them. But how are you sure that your child won't be the one that will sustain the injury.
Frank, but actually, you have made a point here, but I'm even thinking that we are looking at that the bangers with respect to security, because the technology has made it so some of them sound like...
I just discussed one component. Because for those who may not think about security, because for the average father, why I had to start with this is because for the average parent, for the average guardian, you love your child.
You just run out of time.
Yes, so then for security, of course, she has given you an example. We've had people with BP problem having their health situation exacerbated because suddenly they heard the sound of bam, 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 bam. And from nowhere, they almost collapse.
I almost did, actually.
And then the security implication. Criminals can also take advantage of this. And by the time they are shooting their way through to your house or through the neighborhood, people will actually think so the bangers can actually act like a camouflage. The sound of the bangers will actually provide a disguise, a cover for criminals to actually carry a massive attack and take everyone unaware. So we must discourage our kids from the use of bangers.
What are the numbers you can use in
We'll
case?
provide the numbers.
Can you say it on air? Somebody might just write it. Maybe
I'll provide it before I leave.
All right, Kabiru, just your final thoughts on this within 30 seconds, please.
Firstly, on the bangers, I know some commands. Borno, in particular, has come out with a circular saying that bangers cannot be used during the Yuletide season. So Nigerians' compliance is absolutely important. You don't want to be arrested, as it were, for disobeying a particular function. But having said that, let's take time. Find out the nearest security formations to us, and if we've not reached out to them, let's reach out to them, get their numbers, and if we're traveling, let's make sure, for instance, if something happens, that we know where and who to call. I think it's very important. Most Nigerians take that for granted. Let's use this period. Journey management, like he's mentioned, is very important, and an aspect of journey management is information regarding where you're going to, and that information should include the security formations along the route and in the destination where you're going to.
Okay, Mr. Frankumba, I have to come back to you now. They say there's a trending story in the social media where they say some of these bangers are as harmful as a bomb. Are you looking into that? Or
yes, like Kabir actually said.
Like the boy that lost his 3 fingers.
Yes, we have also tried to put out communication, particularly at the state command levels, using local media stations to actually talk about this, tell our citizens we need to stay away from this. There are so many reasons why we need. It's also dry season, and lots of fire incidents. Buildings have been set ablaze, filling stations have been set ablaze, vehicles has gone up in flames just because of that.
And not only that, in the markets, we have our markets being gutted by fire, and there are sellers of bangers in such markets, right? So, and at this point, we'd like to appreciate all our guests for making it possible for us to have a good show this morning. First of all, the police Piero Frankumba, it's been a pleasure having you here. But we still expect to have these numbers.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to Nigerians.
All right,
you will have them.
FRA Seasonal Commanding Officer Zone RS7 Abuja, Niger, ACM Omar Guntu Ibrahim.
Yes.
Thank you for the information you brought on board this morning.
Thank you, sir.
All right, and of course, Kabiru Adamu, Security Risk Management, is always here with us when we talk about security matters. Merry Christmas to you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Same to you.
All right, next, sports.
Super Falcons captain Aziz Adushola was on target as Barcelona ladies registered a 3-1 win